For several years, I lived a fast-paced life overseeing national cancer research programs, traveling between conferences and medical centers. Though fulfilling, it wore me down. My spouse, Daniel, and I longed for a peaceful home base. When a lovely house in Silverleaf Estates became available, we thought it a perfect retreat. The winding streets, manicured lawns, and well-lit sidewalks looked worlds away from my intense schedule at the National Oncology Institute. So, on a bright afternoon, our moving truck pulled into Elm Crest Lane. Neighbors offered polite waves. The breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass. I remember exhaling, relieved to imagine a calmer life, one less overshadowed by urgent phone calls or cross-country flights. Yet, as we unpacked boxes, a slim, impeccably dressed woman in her 50s appeared. She wore a pastel blazer, crisp slacks, and a pin reading HOA chair. Her posture exuded a certain brisk confidence. "Hello," she said, eyes roving over our boxes. "I'm Belinda Armitage, the association chair. People call me Ms. Armitage." Later, I'd learn many whispered a different nickname. "Karen." I gave a friendly smile. "Nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Andrea Collins, and this is my spouse, Daniel. We're excited to settle in." She scanned the potted flowers we'd placed by the walkway. "Just be sure to follow the landscaping guidelines. Silverleaf Estates has high standards. No unapproved modifications, especially if they alter the exterior's harmony." Her tone was polite but tinged with condescension. I nodded politely, not wanting trouble on day one. I had no idea her obsession with neighborhood harmony would soon extend to a realm far more consequential than lawn aesthetics, namely, critical health services that saved lives. Settling into Silverleaf Estates was pleasant at first. Daniel and I adored the wide backyard, perfect for quiet evenings. I commuted to the National Oncology Institute headquarters a few times weekly, the rest of my duties handled remotely, reviewing new trials, coordinating national screening campaigns, and shaping policy for early cancer detection. One weekend, while exploring the neighborhood, we stumbled upon the Silverleaf Community Center near the main entrance. A sign advertised free monthly cancer screening clinics. Intrigued, I approached a volunteer named Marisol, who explained that for the past year, a local health nonprofit had partnered with community associations to offer free mammograms, cervical screenings, prostate checks, and some basic blood tests. They used mobile medical vans and set up in the center's multi-purpose room. Many residents appreciated the convenience. Some lacked easy access to bigger hospitals or simply preferred a local environment. My heart lifted. As director of the National Oncology Institute, I'd spent years championing early detection. Seeing this kind of grassroots initiative thriving in a suburban neighborhood warmed me. I chatted with the volunteer, praising their efforts. She said the turnouts had been decent, but they hoped for more publicity. I offered to help connect them with official resources. After all, my institute often provided educational materials and small grants to local clinics. She smiled, relieved. "That'd be wonderful. Though, I'm not sure how much longer we'll be allowed to host them. Ms. Armitage's been vocal about restricting such events." I blinked. "Restricting them? What?" Marisol shrugged. "She claims they attract outside visitors and create parking issues. She's also mentioned that a medical clinic isn't the right image for Silverleaf. She threatened not to renew the permission next month." A wave of anger rippled through me. Depriving neighbors of life-saving screenings over trivial aesthetic or logistical concerns was unthinkable. Early detection was crucial to fighting cancer. Canceling these clinics could cost lives. But perhaps it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Ms. Armitage didn't realize the importance of these screenings. I resolved to speak with her, sure that once she understood the clinic's value, she'd relent. After all, who in their right mind would hamper free cancer screenings? But I'd soon discover Karen's unwavering devotion to neighborhood perfection left little room for reason or compassion. That Monday, I attended the monthly HOA meeting, held in a small but well-appointed room at the community center. About 20 residents gathered, plus Ms. Armitage at the head table, flanked by 2 board members. Typical housekeeping issues, lawn maintenance rules, pet regulations, upcoming neighborhood events took up the first half. Then Ms. Armitage announced, next, the board's decision regarding the so-called cancer screening clinics. She adjusted her pastel blazer, scanning the audience. After careful review, We've determined that these clinics bring unnecessary foot traffic and could create liability risks. Therefore, we're suspending all future clinics at the Silverleaf Community Center, effective immediately." A hush fell. Marisol, seated nearby, looked stricken. Several residents frowned or murmured confusion. One older gentleman stood, hesitantly. "But Ms. Armitage, these screenings help folks catch cancer early. Why shut them down over a minor inconvenience?" She gave a tight smile. "While I sympathize, our HOA must maintain the image and safety of Silverleaf. We cannot allow random medical vehicles coming in monthly. If individuals need screenings, they can visit hospitals. We prefer to keep our center free from such commotion." My pulse quickened with anger. Yet, I tried to remain calm. I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Ms. Armitage. I'm Dr. Andrea Collins, new to the neighborhood. I want to point out that these clinics provide vital health services. Many residents, especially older or less mobile folks, rely on the convenience. Couldn't we discuss ways to address your concerns without halting them entirely?" Karen's gaze flicked over me. "Dr. Collins, I appreciate your perspective, but the board has made its decision. The clinics do not align with the serene, upscale environment we cultivate here. We are not a public health facility." I pressed on, measured. "But early detection is crucial in cancer care. Banning these clinics could literally cost lives. Perhaps we can schedule them less frequently or coordinate parking solutions." Her lips tightened. "No, the matter is closed. If you have further questions, you may submit them in writing. Meeting adjourned." She banged a small gavel, effectively silencing discussion. The audience stirred with dismay, but no one dared challenge her further. I walked out seething. Her refusal to even debate solutions alarmed me. Over the years, I'd encountered bureaucratic obstacles, but rarely such a cold dismissal of a life-saving program. If Ms. Armitage's stance held, residents at risk for breast, cervical, or colorectal cancers might skip essential tests. Those with limited mobility or finances wouldn't easily travel to distant hospitals. I realized that Ms. Armitage was either woefully ignorant or dangerously unconcerned about real health implications. The next step was obvious: gather evidence, highlight the necessity of these clinics, and mobilize the community to push back. My role at the National Oncology Institute gave me tools to help. And if she insisted on defiance, well, the overshadowing authority of public health might soon overshadow Ms. Armitage's petty aesthetic concerns. Within days, the heartbreak of the ban spread through Silverleaf Estates. Many older residents, who'd relied on the monthly screenings for convenient checkups, were dismayed. Others were outraged that an HOA, even a strict one, would prioritize a pristine facade over potential cancer detection. Despite Ms. Armitage's attempt to present the clinics as unnecessary, word circulated about how some neighbors credited them with catching suspicious lumps or early warning signs. Marisol confided in me that the local health nonprofit, upon hearing the ban, was unsure where else to set up in the immediate area. They have limited vans and staff. For them to move to another neighborhood might be easy, but for us, it's a huge loss, she said sadly. I decided to convene an informal meeting at my home, inviting concerned neighbors. About 15 showed up, from young parents worried about maternal health to seniors who'd faithfully attended every screening. We discussed the significance of early cancer detection: mammograms, pap smears, prostate exams, colon checks. I gently explained that skipping these for even a year could let a treatable cancer advance dangerously. A neighbor named Althea recounted how her sister's breast lump was caught by a traveling clinic in another town. Without it, she'd have discovered it too late. I can't believe Ms. Armitage would just toss that chance away for us. We resolved to gather testimonies, written statements from residents who benefited or needed the screenings. Another neighbor suggested a petition demanding the board reverse its ban. Meanwhile, I offered to bring in statistics from the National Oncology Institute, showing how community-based screening programs drastically improved survival rates. Our group labeled ourselves Silverleaf for Health, planning to approach the HOA board with our evidence. If that failed, we'd consider wider action, perhaps going to local media or city officials. Everyone felt a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that logical pleas might sway the board. Dread that Ms. Armitage's authoritarian style might stomp out reason. On a personal level, I found my professional and private worlds colliding in ways I never expected. Usually, I oversaw macro-level policies. Now, the fight was in my own backyard. But that proximity also fueled my resolve. These neighbors weren't just statistics. They were real people whose well-being hinged on accessible screenings. Ms. Armitage's intransigence put them at risk, and I couldn't abide that. Our group's plan to present a petition at the next HOA meeting quickly drew Ms. Armitage's ire. 2 days before the scheduled meeting, we discovered that the agenda had been revised. No mention of cancer screenings or the ban's reevaluation. Instead, the board planned to discuss landscape uniformity and updated fence color guidelines. It was a transparent attempt to avoid the topic. Meanwhile, some neighbors reported receiving odd violations notices in their mailboxes, alleged excess yard clutter, improperly parked cars, or excessive noise. Many felt these were retaliatory measures. One older man, who had publicly criticized Ms. Armitage's stance, suddenly got slapped with a roof shingle color mismatch citation, threatening a major fine. The pattern suggested Ms. Armitage was punishing critics to keep them silent. Undaunted, we arranged a plan. Attend the HOA meeting en masse, politely refuse to leave until we were heard. We also printed copies of the petition, over 200 signatures so far, and testimonies from those who had used the screenings. I prepared a concise statement about the medical necessity of local detection programs, referencing official institute data. However, on the evening of the meeting, Ms. Armitage posted a sign on the clubhouse door, "Meeting canceled, board unavailable." No prior notice, no explanation. People milled around, confused and upset. Marisol confronted Ms. Armitage outside the clubhouse as she tried to slip away. "You can't just cancel last minute. We have urgent business," she cried. Karen responded icily. "The board has no time for such trivial matters. Any concerns about medical events belong elsewhere. This is a private association." She marched off. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some calling her a coward for dodging the issue. Things escalated further when Ms. Armitage posted on the HOA website that any unauthorized gathering or medical services on HOA property will incur heavy fines, as they violate our newly updated rules. She expanded the original ban to include health fairs of any kind. This was pure intimidation, aiming to quell any attempt to hold screenings on private lawns or community corners. People started talking about a recall election to remove her as chair. But recall procedures were cumbersome, and Ms. Armitage apparently had loyal board members in her pocket. At this point, I recognized that gentle persuasion wouldn't suffice. Ms. Armitage was doubling down, refusing to let the clinics return. Meanwhile, neighbors grew more anxious, especially those due for routine checks. Some had already postponed hospital visits, counting on the monthly local screenings. If we waited too long, some might miss critical windows for detecting early tumors. I resolved to step up the fight. Perhaps local media or the city health department could intervene. Better yet, the National Oncology Institute's name carried weight. If Ms. Armitage thought her suburban domain was immune to outside scrutiny, she was sorely mistaken. The wheels in my mind turned, formulating a broader strategy to leverage my position, rally public opinion, and corner Karen legally if needed. The stakes were too high for half measures. Word of the ban eventually reached my professional colleagues. Dr. Samuel Green, a lead researcher at the Institute, called me after hearing rumors from a local nurse. "Andrea, is it true your HOA banned screenings? That's insane. We can't let that stand. People rely on those mobile clinics." I briefed him on the situation, Ms. Armitage's obstinate stance, the canceled meeting, the intimidation. Dr. Green was appalled. "We can mobilize some resources," he said. "Perhaps an official letter from the Institute, highlighting how essential these programs are, might sway them." "That's my thought," I replied. "We need more than that, though. Maybe we can partner with the county health department and the city council. If they declare a local initiative for cancer screening, the HOA might be forced to comply." "Count me in," Dr. Green said. "We'll draft a statement condemning the ban, pushing for reinstatement. If that doesn't work, we'll escalate. The Institute can back a legal challenge or coordinate a media campaign. Just say the word." His support lifted my spirits. Meanwhile, the volunteer nonprofit that previously ran the Silverleaf clinics expressed willingness to resume if the ban were lifted, or if we could find a private location in the neighborhood that wasn't under HOA control. But Ms. Armitage's expanded health fair rule threatened fines even for private lawns if it drew a crowd. She was effectively strangling any local hosting option. Sensing we needed an alternative location, a neighbor named Tanya offered her large backyard just outside the official HOA boundaries. The boundary lines were murky in that corner, but it might be enough. We quietly planned a pop-up screening day there. The mobile unit would park on the adjacent city street, out of HOA jurisdiction. Residents who wanted screening could show up discreetly. If Ms. Armitage tried to shut it down, we'd challenge her legal claim over property that might not even belong to the association. It felt risky, but also necessary. People needed these tests. The fungus of fear Ms. Armitage spread mustn't stand in the way of cancer detection. In parallel, I provided Dr. Green with local media contacts. Perhaps a well-timed press release from the National Oncology Institute would shine a spotlight on how a single HOA chair's ignorance endangered real lives. Under that scrutiny, Ms. Armitage might crumble, or at least back off. Yet an undercurrent of anxiety persisted. Ms. Armitage had proven cunning. If she discovered the plan for a private pop-up clinic, she might escalate further, imposing punishments or even calling law enforcement. I braced for a showdown. This was no longer a minor squabble over fence colors. This was a question of life or death for residents at risk of undiscovered cancers. We set the date for the pop-up clinic, a Saturday morning in Tanya's spacious backyard, located on a side of the community that straddled the official boundary. The local health nonprofit arranged to bring their mobile screening van, offering mammograms, basic blood tests, and other checks. We spread the word quietly among neighbors, urging them to come if they needed screenings. Early that day, the medical team arrived, setting up discreetly behind Tanya's house. A small stream of residents trickled in, appreciative of the chance to get tested again. Some were older folks who previously depended on the monthly clinic. The atmosphere was peaceful, hopeful. I hovered around, offering moral support and basic advice, without stepping on the medical staff's toes, of course. But sure enough, mid-morning, an ominous figure loomed on the street. Ms. Armitage, wearing her pastel blazer, accompanied by two men carrying clipboards, likely her minions or hired security. She glared at the modest queue outside Tanya's gate. The men began snapping photos, presumably collecting evidence of a violation. One tried to walk onto Tanya's property. Tanya blocked him, explaining that this was private land and they had no right to trespass. Ms. Armitage sneered. "You're defying HOA policy about unauthorized medical gatherings. Expect hefty fines and possible legal action." She brandished her phone, presumably calling the police. I stepped forward, heart pounding. "You have no jurisdiction here, Ms. Armitage. This property sits outside official HOA lines, and the street is public. We're holding a lawful health event with licensed professionals." She shot me a venomous look. "How dare you undermine our community standards, Dr. Collins? The board specifically banned such clinics." I met her gaze steadily. "Your board can't ban essential health services on private property outside your authority. These neighbors are exercising their right to medical care. You're the one overstepping." She sputtered, turning red. "We'll see about that." Minutes later, a single police cruiser arrived, an officer stepping out to assess the situation. Ms. Armitage approached him, gesturing wildly at the screening van. The officer listened, then calmly asked for relevant documentation. Tanya and I presented property maps proving the address was outside the HOA. The officer frowned, told Ms. Armitage that he saw no crime in people receiving medical tests on private land. Incensed, Ms. Armitage threatened to file civil suits anyway. The officer shrugged, repeating that it was a civil matter, not a police one, and that if there was a boundary dispute, it had to be settled in court. Defeated, she left with her minions, but not before warning us, "You'll regret this. All of you." Despite the tension, the clinic continued. Over 50 residents got screenings that day, many expressing relief that Ms. Armitage's intimidation had failed. At day's end, we were exhausted but triumphant. A small victory, yet overshadowed by the knowledge that Ms. Armitage would escalate her vendetta. She'd already threatened legal action and teased further retaliation. Still, I felt renewed resolve. That we'd held even one successful clinic despite her ban was a testament to community willpower. If Ms. Armitage insisted on dragging us into a bigger fight, so be it. My national platform, plus the unstoppable force of neighbors demanding health care, would prove more formidable than any petty HOA rule. Little did I suspect how quickly Ms. Armitage's next move would push the conflict into a realm of legal ramifications that spelled her downfall. The success of the pop-up clinic emboldened more neighbors to speak out. Meanwhile, Ms. Armitage allegedly ramped up her intimidation tactics, random fines, public shaming in HOA newsletters. She openly labeled participants as rebels, undermining the neighborhood's image. The hostility soared. People either cowered or joined our side, outraged by her bullheadedness. Then, a stroke of luck arrived, an anonymous tip from inside the HOA office. A clerk named Janelle, disgusted by Ms. Armitage's conduct, leaked documents to me. Among them were internal emails where Ms. Armitage explicitly stated her desire to eliminate all traces of medical activity in Silverleaf, calling it too unsightly and reminiscent of lower-class neighborhoods. She also wrote about how we must maintain a perfect environment, no matter the cost. More damning, one email thread showed Ms. Armitage acknowledging that some older residents might skip screenings if they had to go elsewhere, but concluded, that's not the HOA's concern. If they're too feeble to drive, oh well. We can't cater to everyone. Reading these callous words lit a fire in me. This wasn't mere ignorance. It was willful disregard for people's health. She understood that her ban would prevent essential cancer detection, and she didn't care. The moral outrage I felt was immense. We took these leaked emails to the local paper, the Silverleaf Courier, and to a city council member. The scandal soared. Headlines read, HOA chair decries cancer clinics as unsightly, admits residents may suffer. Social media erupted in condemnation, with many calling Ms. Armitage's actions heartless. Politicians weighed in, with one council member publicly stating that city code might override any HOA bans on critical medical services. Perhaps most significantly, I sent copies of the emails to Dr. Green at the National Oncology Institute. He assembled a press statement from the institute, denouncing the ban as an affront to basic human decency and public health. The statement garnered national attention, with major news outlets picking up the story. Within days, Ms. Armitage found herself reviled beyond Silverleaf's borders. She tried to dismiss the emails as fake or taken out of context, but the caretaker Janelle confirmed their authenticity. The HOA board faced intense backlash for letting Ms. Armitage unilaterally impose the ban. Rumors swirled that multiple board members were planning a special vote to remove her from the chair. Sensing her grip slipping, Ms. Armitage flailed with last-ditch measures. She threatened defamation lawsuits against me, the Courier, and the Institute. She posted rants on the HOA site about outsiders infiltrating Silverleaf's private domain. But it was too late. The narrative was set. She was the monstrous official who blocked cancer screenings for purely cosmetic reasons. Public sentiment was firmly against her. If Ms. Armitage had recognized the unstoppable momentum, she might have resigned quietly. Instead, she dug in deeper, culminating in an explosive confrontation that would finalize her undoing. Under mounting pressure, the City Council announced a hearing to discuss whether local HOAs could deny essential healthcare services or if city ordinance should mandate that community centers remain available for screenings. The council invited Ms. Armitage, the HOA board, and concerned residents to testify. Media coverage was intense, with cameras lining the steps of City Hall on the hearing day. Inside a packed chamber, the council members listened attentively as people gave statements. Some told heartbreaking stories. An elderly neighbor had detected a lump last year at the free clinic, likely saving her life. Others mentioned how the ban forced them to forego screenings. Marisol recounted how Ms. Armitage's intimidation had led the nonprofit to withdraw, fearful of legal entanglements. I took the podium, explaining my background as director of the National Oncology Institute. The room fell silent when I revealed my full title. Many had known I was Dr. Collins, but not the depth of my national role. I described the significance of early detection in cancer outcomes, the necessity of accessible local screening, and the moral imperative for HOAs to support rather than stifle it. Then Ms. Armitage, flanked by an attorney, gave her statement. She repeated her usual claims. The clinics were unsightly, unvetted outsiders could cause disruption, there's liability risk, etc. She insisted she never intended harm, but was protecting the community's harmony. She also accused me of orchestrating a media smear campaign. When cross-examined by a council member, Ms. Armitage's composure cracked. They questioned the leaked emails, quoting her lines about older residents being too feeble to drive. She tried to dodge, saying it was misquoted, but the council pressed. Finally, the tension broke. Ms. Armitage snapped, "Yes, I stand by protecting our aesthetics. If some can't access the clinic otherwise, that's not the HOA's responsibility." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Cameras clicked. The council chair scowled, concluding that Ms. Armitage was unapologetic about prioritizing superficial cleanliness over life-saving health services. The hearing ended with the council strongly hinting they'd pass a city ordinance preventing HOAs from banning legitimate medical clinics. Ms. Armitage stumbled out, hounded by reporters shouting questions about her callous remarks. That night, a wave of fury swept through Silverleaf. Neighbors demanded Ms. Armitage's immediate resignation. The board scheduled an emergency session, rumored to be a last chance for her to step down gracefully. But the final blow was still to come. A formal investigation into potential financial improprieties, spurred by allegations that Ms. Armitage had used HOA funds to hire legal muscle and intimidate residents. If proven, it could lead to criminal charges or civil suits. She was rapidly running out of allies. The day after the council hearing, I received a frantic call from Henry, a timid board member who privately opposed Ms. Armitage. He told me that the HOA's accountant discovered suspicious transactions in the association's budget. Thousands of dollars were funneled to a consulting firm that no one recognized, apparently authorized solely by Ms. Armitage. The board had no record of a vote approving such expenditures. Henry suspected Ms. Armitage used these funds to pay for her personal legal strategy against the screening clinics, or possibly to hire enforcers to ensure compliance with her ban. If this was true, it was a bombshell. Diverting HOA money for personal vendettas was a breach of fiduciary duty, potentially criminal if proven. Henry said the accountant was prepared to file a formal complaint. The board demanded Ms. Armitage produce receipts or face immediate termination. I realized that with the council hearing fiasco and these financial irregularities, Ms. Armitage's entire facade was collapsing. She tried to control a suburban enclave with an iron fist, but ended up in the crosshairs of city law, potential criminal charges, and an angry board. The illusions of neighborhood harmony couldn't mask blatant corruption. As news of the alleged embezzlement trickled out, neighbors raged. Some discovered overdue maintenance projects starved of funding, while Ms. Armitage's personal war on screenings received lavish resources. The once intimidated or apathetic majority now demanded accountability. A recall petition soared to over 60% of homeowners, far above the threshold needed. The question was whether Ms. Armitage would be forcibly removed before the state authorities indicted her. Meanwhile, the city, spurred by public outcry, was fast-tracking an ordinance guaranteeing any recognized medical nonprofit's right to conduct screening in private developments. This meant even if Ms. Armitage somehow clung to power, her ban would be moot. But the real curiosity was how severe her punishment would be once the investigations concluded. Little did we suspect it would be more dramatic than any typical HOA removal. The week that followed was a whirlwind. Ms. Armitage avoided public appearances, possibly to evade furious neighbors and reporters camped outside her home. Rumor had it she fired the accountant who discovered her suspicious transactions, an act that only fueled speculation she was hiding wrongdoing. Then, on a Friday evening, the HOA announced an emergency membership meeting to address the recall petition. The entire neighborhood seemed to attend, cramming the community center. A hush fell as Ms. Armitage, flanked by a lawyer, took the podium. Her usual pastel attire and controlled demeanor were overshadowed by tension in her eyes. One by one, residents voiced complaints. Seniors recounted how the screening ban frightened them. A mother told of skipping a pap test she needed. A father described how he had to drive 40 miles for a colonoscopy screening he would have done locally. Others lambasted the shady finances. Henry read out the suspicious consulting firm line items, totaling tens of thousands. Ms. Carter described how Ms. Armitage browbeat them into silence. Finally, Ms. Armitage tried to defend herself, claiming she did nothing illegal, that the clinics were not proven safe, and that the money was for security enhancements. The crowd reacted with scoffs. Some demanded her immediate resignation. The recall petition leaders called for a vote of no confidence. As the membership prepared to cast written ballots, Ms. Armitage grew desperate, threatening to take everyone down, with lawsuits if the recall succeeded. The crowd murmured in shock. That was the last straw. The ballots were counted quickly, with an overwhelming majority in favor of removing Ms. Armitage from the board. Cheers erupted. Ms. Armitage stared at the result, stunned. But the drama wasn't over. Right then, uniformed officers from the county sheriff's office entered. One read from a warrant for Ms. Armitage's arrest, citing probable cause for embezzlement of HOA funds and potential fraud. The crowd parted in silence as Ms. Armitage was handcuffed, sputtering that it was all a big misunderstanding. The once untouchable HOA queen found herself led away in front of the entire neighborhood, a humiliating finale to her reign of intimidation. Over the following weeks, the new HOA leadership, led by Ms. Carter and Henry, moved swiftly to mend fences. They officially rescinded the cancer screening ban, inviting the local nonprofit to resume monthly clinics at the community center. The city council, cheered by residents, passed its ordinance guaranteeing the right to such screenings in private developments. With that, Ms. Armitage's barrier to essential health services crumbled for good. Neighbors breathed sighs of relief. Many apologized for not speaking up sooner, admitting that Ms. Armitage's strong-arm tactics had cowed them. But the revelations of her financial misdeeds and callous attitude spurred a wave of unity. People wanted to restore trust in the association, ensuring no future chair could hijack it for personal vendettas. Meanwhile, Ms. Armitage's legal troubles deepened. Investigation uncovered that she'd indeed diverted HOA funds to pay lawyers, private security, and hush money to certain contractors. She faced criminal charges for embezzlement, plus civil suits from residents seeking restitution for emotional distress or missed screenings. The district attorney signaled an intent to prosecute vigorously, given the harm inflicted on a vulnerable population. At the newly re-established screening clinics, attendance soared. Some residents got tested for the first time in months. The nonprofit staff recognized me, grateful for the role I played in toppling the ban. But I insisted the real credit lay with the neighbors who bravely refused to let Ms. Armitage's tyranny stand. My position at the National Oncology Institute lent power, but their local determination sealed the victory. Reflecting on these events, I realized how close we came to letting a single misguided official endanger countless lives. Cancer doesn't wait for bureaucratic disputes. If Ms. Armitage's ban had persisted, unknown lumps or lesions might have gone undetected until too late. Stopping her was more than a local spat. It was a moral imperative to protect basic health rights. Months passed as Ms. Armitage awaited trial. The evidence was overwhelming. Misappropriated HOA funds, explicit instructions to hamper legitimate medical providers, and public statements acknowledging the clinic's importance yet ignoring them for her aesthetic ideals. She ultimately accepted a plea deal, but the judge took a firm stance given the severity of her actions. At her sentencing, the court cited how her ban and intimidation threatened the well-being of a community that needed screenings. The financial misdeeds underscored her abuse of power. The judge remarked, "You placed vanity above human life, undermining essential health care out of personal arrogance. Society cannot tolerate such disregard." The final punishment was harsh: 2 years in prison for fraud and misuse of funds, plus substantial restitution to the HOA. To cover these damages, the court approved the seizure of Ms. Armitage's home, the once pristine property she'd so jealously guarded. She left the courtroom in handcuffs, tears sliding down a face twisted with shock and regret. Thus ended her reign, a cautionary tale about petty tyranny overshadowed by real human needs. The news coverage portrayed her downfall as a stark example of how an HOA official, intoxicated by power, could stray so far from compassion. Meanwhile, neighbors expressed relief and hoped that such cruelty would never again hold sway in Silverleaf Estates. Shortly after Ms. Armitage's sentencing, Silverleaf Estates held its first fully sanctioned cancer screening clinic in nearly a year, this time with the HOA's enthusiastic blessing. Banners reading, "Welcome back, Health Heroes," adorned the community center's entrance. The volunteer nonprofit arrived, grateful for an unimpeded space. People lined up steadily, glad for a convenient, safe environment to check up on their health. I walked through the clinic stations, smiling at how the mere presence of these staff and equipment felt normal again. An older woman recognized me from the fiasco. "Thank you, Dr. Collins," she said softly. "I was so behind on my mammogram, but now I can get it right here." My heart warmed. This was precisely why I fought Ms. Armitage's ban. Daniel wandered the hall, snapping photos of the joyous mood. Families chatted, staff explained test procedures, neighbors recognized one another in line and swapped recipes. The mood was festive, a stark contrast to the tension that once haunted these walls. The new HOA board members circulated, ensuring everything ran smoothly, no sign of aggression or intimidation. Looking at the setup, I felt vindicated. Ms. Armitage's downfall had freed Silverleaf from a strangling grip. The people proved that a single tyrant, no matter how entrenched, could be toppled by collective resolve, especially when bolstered by official, legal, and moral backing from institutions like the National Oncology Institute. In the end, public health triumphed over petty aesthetics. Today, Silverleaf Estates stands as a beacon for how communities can integrate local health programs. The monthly screenings remain a beloved fixture, bringing families and older citizens access to essential checks. As the director of the National Oncology Institute, I often cite Silverleaf as an example during my policy presentations, an illustration of how grassroots activism can overcome harmful local governance and champion life-saving medical access. As for Karen, Belinda Armitage, her story concluded with jail time and the confiscation of her property. After her prison sentence, she faded from local memory, her once powerful image replaced by regret and disrepute. Some say she relocated out of state, presumably to rebuild her life. While some folks pity her downfall, most consider it necessary justice. In the end, the neighborhood forged a stronger bond from adversity. Neighbors stand up for each other's welfare, more aware that a well-functioning community must never ignore basic health needs. The memory of Ms. Armitage's misguided ban lingers as a cautionary tale, that even a small, privileged suburb can become a battleground if a single official forgets that real people and real lives are at stake. I remain grateful to have played a role, bridging my national expertise with local activism. The synergy between professional knowledge and grassroots determination dismantled a ban that threatened to cost lives. And if one moral stands out above all, no aesthetic preference or private vendetta can justify denying people critical health care. That truth resonates far beyond Silverleaf Estates, echoing throughout the countless communities that strive to protect and nurture one another.